This is South African political cartoonist Jonathan Shapiro. Known better as Zapiro, he's often accused of going too far when going after politicians.
To get into those debates, get under people's skin. And that's what I try to do there.
I came here to learn about his principles and his process. Welcome to the mind of Zapiro. This is the beginning, right? This is the genesis.
Yeah, the genesis. Often it's words. I'm thinking like, I'm thinking about Israel and the United States and Gaza, and I'm trying to think what point am I going to try. Sort of starting to think Netanyahu. Started to think about the United States giving Israel weapons while condemning, while starting to sort of lightly condemn them. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Let me see how I can. I started trying to figure out what I'm trying to say, and it actually came together quicker in this little drawing than it sometimes does. The idea, Israel has gone too far. I must express extreme disapproval, something like that. And you see the 32,000. I found out almost while I'm doing the cartoon, it's become 33,000. That's how this thing is moving. I have old-fashioned files and things, so I find my pictures of planes and I looked to see what kind of planes they are. They're F-35s, so I found more pictures of F-35s. So I kind of start using everything and then I start working those things into this on my light box, my ancient light box, and then I have to, once I've got a crisp one of that, I make another one that I can put over here, and then I put a piece of proper card over that, and then I start penciling a little bit and then start inking. For this one I was using, I wasn't using my ink pens. I actually have old-fashioned ink pens, but I decided for this one I'd be using some more modern pens, and then because I had too much Tipex and whiteout to color on the original, then I make a copy and I color on the copy. Once I've decided what it is I'm trying to communicate, then I'm looking for a vehicle to communicate it, and often it will be what I call a sitcom cartoon. It will also often be a conceptual cartoon. A conceptual cartoon could often be one of those single panel things that just hits you in the solar plexus, either funny or shocking or cerebral or whatever it is, as long as it helps you see something in a slightly different way. That is where the punch comes. Right. That's where the twist comes. That's where the satire comes. That's where the comprehension comes and the memorability, all of that. But these sitcom cartoons function in a very similar way. They can also be funny, more often than not with a sitcom. They can usually you're trying to use humor as your sort of major means of communicating, but it could also be shock. It could also be cerebral. It could also be pathos. In this instance, I've tried to squeeze out something funny, like a sort of a school teacher, principal kind of approach. Like he's going to really chastise, really say like what he really feels, and then he goes and he says, well, here's 25 bomb-equipped warplanes. Don't do it again. Yeah. It's like a Netanyahu kind of looks almost once. Netanyahu's the one who has the kind of like little in-joke with the reader.
Yeah, how much time do you spend on that expression of Netanyahu? Because like you're getting that where he's like business as usual. Yeah, I've got to take the lecture, but I'm still taking the warplanes.
Interestingly, that for me just came like that.
Oh, interesting.
Because I have drawn Netanyahu many times, and this is in fact one of my better drawings of Netanyahu. It just worked really well, and he's got that he's got those eyebrows, he's got the sort of and he's got the slightly skew mouth, and all of that worked really well. Biden, I haven't drawn as much as many cartoonists around the world have, because here in South Africa we are very parochial. I've drawn Trump a lot. Biden, I drew a lot in. I drew quite a bit in the sort of run up to the elections, and when he was new, and then not very often since then. I mean, and he's been a huge disappointment.
I mean, but you don't have him with any spark of light in his eyes,
So,
which of course plays into. Tell me, do you think? Listen, I don't want to draw him looking too sleepy, which kind of plays into that idea from the right that he's just senile. Or like, tell me what you do.
Let me show you something. My figurine of Nelson Mandela, which is basically, I had a fantastic sculptor who was able to draw exactly, who was able to work out 3D versions of exactly what I draw. Yeah. Do you see a pupil or open eye there?
No. But that looks out of touch, and that looks brilliant. Tell me, how do you do
with
that?
Biden, my channeling of it's also a 3D show. It's the old British spitting image show where they had a lot of characters who sort of didn't know what the hell was going on, and they walk around like that. That's my version.
Right.
And in a sense, the moment I drew Biden here, I was thinking, I've got to have him. He's not even looking at that board. He just kind of looks and says, but I have to express disapproval.
That's true. He's not looking at it. That's true.
And so I just kind of have him sort of, they've gone too far. Or I'll have to, I must extreme disapproval. And then he's still with eyes closed, sort of very small, not very. And that's what I'm sort of channeling here. Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the presence of genius. This is a masterclass. Like, they should pay you for this. I want to take a step back for a second and talk a little bit about young Jonathan Shapiro, or Zapiro. So, it's apartheid South Africa. You're white in apartheid South Africa. I mean, where you come from, maybe Jews were not considered white enough, but in apartheid, you're considered white, which comes with a certain amount of privilege. Your politics are against the system, and you want to express yourself and you want to punch up against the system. Tell me about that young man and how he saw himself in the world and what he wanted to achieve in this world.
So at a very young age, I think I, like everybody else, was a cartoonist. I always feel like those of us who carry on are doing what children do, and just carrying on and adding a level of sophistication to it. Because as a child, you and everybody else and I, you draw without thinking of the strictures, without thinking of the constraints. You draw what you feel. You draw things that might be rude. You don't have those kind of societal structures that hold you in place, or constraints that stop you from doing that. And I think most kids are very much, I mean, it's kind of what we do, but then we just add that level of sophistication of drawing, sophistication of thought. True story is that when I was about 4 years old and I was having nightmares, my mother realized that I was, and I told her that I was having nightmares about these monsters. And she said, well, she gave me some paper and she said, draw them. Because she saw that was a particular means of expression for me. And I drew them, and it actually helped. My mother was amazing. My mother's a huge influence on me, later politically, but probably even then politically. I didn't even realize it. She was much more left-wing than the Jewish community in general here. Helped to kind of inculcate that an understanding from about the age of 7 or 8, when I remember when Verwoerd died. So now this is jumping from the cartooning side to the kind of political, but when Verwoerd was stabbed in Parliament and died, my mother, on the way to school, I remember we were talking about it, and she said, well, you know that many of us don't consider him a good man. And explained something of the situation in the country and black people in the country and oppression. So I get to school, and everybody's kind of asked to pray in my class, to pray for Verwoerd. Now, firstly, there's a very sort of Christian thing at that stage. I'm kind of a little bit in the minority as a not very avid Jew, and certainly to become a kind of secular humanist, very non-practicing Jew. But at that point, it's sort of Jesus and whatever, which alienates me a bit, but much more so, we all asked to pray for Verwoerd, and people sort of lower their eyes, and I'm looking around for somebody else who kind of feels what I feel.
And just for clarity, the architect of apartheid, Hendrik Verwoerd.
Hendrik Verwoerd, the architect of apartheid. My cartooning influences, meanwhile, were mostly comics when I was very young. It was Giles, the British Express, the Daily Express cartoonist in Britain, very famous in Britain and in the sort of the colonies, or even the colonies becoming ex-colonies. Then Tintin was my next influence, politically very unsound, but absolutely brilliant storytelling. And then Peanuts, who I think is a real philosopher, Charles Schulz. And then from only when I was a teenager did I start becoming aware of one local cartoonist, a guy called David Morea, not as celebrated in South Africa as he should be, because he was a properly trained journalist, not the best artist around, but a great head, very anti-apartheid, very scathing of all those kind of the weirdness of apartheid.
Right, and you've been drawing monsters ever since. In a way, the politicians, if you...
I've done a cartoon saying exactly that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
Jeez, that is so...
I thought I was being clever. Yeah.
No, that's the...
Oh, very
that
good.
is the punchline.
Oh, very good, very good.
That is the punchline of a cartoon, of a comic strip that I did in... Yeah, when I...
Ah, so yeah. Oh, so
This,
you're...
this is a sort of a... This is a potted version of some of the stuff that I've only got about that far.
Right.
But yeah, this is the story. My mother gives me the paper, and I draw them, and then sort of my political involvement really began later. I went to architectural school to try and stay out of the army, and I really wanted to become a cartoonist. I didn't want to become an architect. I actually wanted to become a cartoonist, but I just didn't see a way in the really sort of dark days in the 70s. I mean, everything was kind of shut down. The old National Party government had succeeded in squashing whatever revolution looked like it was starting in 1960, and the ANC were out of the country or underground or deep underground or in jail. 1976 happened, the Soweto uprising happened and was brutally suppressed in my matric year. I then have to decide, I definitely don't want to go to the army. I want to go try and study something and then stay out of the army and hopefully never go. I had a Bachelor of Architectural Studies degree, and the degree was created so that people like me could change direction, even within that same faculty. But it meant nothing to the army. So I suddenly had to report for duty with 3 weeks to go. And that was my big crisis, which,
right.
So here I don't deal with the army too much, but here I eventually, my political involvement, which began during the army, lands me to be detained without trial by the security police. And then that line that you just used is exactly the line that I used. There were, I didn't stop drawing monsters. There were other monsters to draw.
You came to international prominence with not only the cartoons of the president of South Africa, but the fact that he sued you. And
I hope I came into international prominence a little before that.
My
cartoons of Nelson Mandela.
Sorry about that. My apologies. Okay. You came to greater international prominence by the fact that the president was suing you.
Yes.
I mean, this is something, maybe it's not so unique in authoritarian systems, but I mean, South Africa is a democracy, a free democracy, just post-apartheid. I want to talk about that particular Lady Justice cartoon. Yeah. That was the one, right?
No.
No. Just fire the interviewer.
No, sorry. Basically, Jacob Zuma sued me 2 years before that for the first time. His first lawsuit was a world record lawsuit against a cartoonist in 2006, when Zuma was put on trial for rape in 2006. I had already been doing critical cartoons of him for 3.5 years. The first critical cartoon I had of him with a cloud hanging over his head and warning that he was a guy in the ANC that you had to be careful of was at the end of 2002, when it became, when my colleagues, the investigative journalists at the publications I worked for started to uncover his arms deal corruption from 1999 and possibly even before that. So I first did that. By 2006, when he was then accused of rape, I did cartoons that brought in the corruption and issues of his attitude to women and all of that. I did.
And you had the famous shower head, because
Yes.
in court he said, I took a shower
That's right.
after the act.
Under cross-examination, Jacob Zuma was asked, did you know that this person that you had so-called consensual sex with, of course she said it was rape, was HIV positive? He said, yes. Did you use protection? No. But then, a bit later, I think he was kind of second-guessing. They said, what did you do after this supposed consensual sex with this person? Oh, I had a shower. Why? To lessen my chance of infection. Now, Jacob Zuma, when he was deputy president before this, he had been head of the National AIDS Council. So that was utterly bizarre. So, and then I had the shower on his head, which was for the first one was labeled for AIDS protection. And the next cartoon I didn't have the shower on his head. And a number of people said to me, where's the shower? And I suddenly realized, oh, this is a thing that's going to catch on.
And it stayed with him throughout then.
Absolutely. So I did these three, he sued me for 3 cartoons, one of which was the first cartoon with a shower. And they were 5 million rand a piece. That amounts to 15 million rand, which at that stage was $2 million US, which was probably double the amount that any cartoonist had ever been sued for anywhere in the world. Also didn't make any difference because ultimately he didn't see any money. But the idea was this defamation lawsuit against me was for, he valued his dignity and his reputation. And then there were 2 other cartoons, and that lawsuit went for 6 years. In the meantime, I do the Lady Justice cartoon in 2008.
So Zuma's enablers in your mind, other politicians who are in influential positions in the state apparatus, are holding down justice, and he is ready to rape justice.
Yeah. This cartoon that I did in 2008 is, it's the single most, it is the single most sort of explosive cartoon that I've ever done, I think.
ANC Youth League, ANC, SACP Communist Party, and COSATU, the trade union. Julius Malema there, who would later turn on Zuma. A lot of them would turn on Zuma afterwards. Go for it, boss.
Yeah. A metaphor, it has to be seen as a metaphor because I labeled this person justice system.
So even for myself, I look at it and I cringe a little bit, and perhaps I've also changed because the zeitgeist has changed, whereas a few years ago I didn't, right? Because there would be those who say that no matter what, even if it's for the right reasons, you don't show a woman, even if you're insinuating it, being raped, even if it's a metaphor. So do you wonder if culturally some of these cartoons might not age well?
This cartoon is one that I've discussed and debated and defended more than any that I've ever done. It's been the subject of a number of theses. It's been attacked. It's been supported.
Like, I don't think feminists want to be defending Jacob Zuma.
No. But this cartoon has been to the Human Rights Commission where some of those things were debated. It was given a kind of clearance there. It's been in, Jacob Zuma sued me a second time for it. Of course, that doesn't mean anything to feminist activists or anything like that. There's the politics, and then there's the how I'm saying it, the metaphor and all of that. So, but I will defend this. I would defend it then, and I did, and I would still defend it. My first, let me give a little context here. I mean, first of all, I want you said showing a woman being raped.
Or even insinuating it.
No, you see, because
okay, it's not, but it's true.
That I thought about,
but it looks like a setup of
yes,
it. Yes,
I looked at that so carefully. I thought the last thing that I want to do is to do something that does not show empathy for even this symbolic figure. Now, the figure of Lady Justice is not a real person. It's somebody who, and again, it's not I mean, I thought so carefully about all the imagery in here. I had been drawing black lady justices for a decade already. So this is somebody who represents the women of South Africa. She's definitely got to look more black than white. I've got to show empathy. If I'm going to do this, because the way I thought of the drawing was, I said out loud to myself sitting at my drawing, that bastard is raping the justice system. It's not an attack on, it's not in any way punching down towards women who experience this kind of thing. In a way, it's also, Zuma is most definitely, and these guys are part of that patriarchy that who actually do oppress and persecute and denigrate and patronize and brutalize women. I mean, Zuma had in fact been charged with rape, although that's not explicit in this drawing.
But it's folded into it, and you've got him taking off his trousers and opening his belt buckle.
And the way that they had treated the rape accused, he and his supporters had treated the rape accused, the rape accuser, who ultimately was sort of hounded to her death.
Now we look back and we see that we consider the country being captured at that time by a sort of cabal of corrupt politicians looting the coffers of the country, led by Zuma. Your persona at the time is sort of, I don't want to say flippant, but I mean very courageous, and like, bring it on. Whether that was by design or not, whether that was your intention or not. But I wonder, to what extent did you also feel fragile? Because it's no joke when a president with all the resources of a state is coming after you. You know, not only the big numbers in terms of like, you know, wanting to sue you for $2 million and all of that stuff, but like, did you ever feel, I need to look over my shoulder, I'm afraid for myself, for my family?
I felt that much more for my family than for myself. The kind of feistiness and I'm not saying there were never any moments when I often talk about the moment when I got the first lawsuit, when there's a sheriff, there's a sort of some official guy at the gate, and I say on the intercom, and he says, yeah, sheriff of the court. I think, well, what is this? And then, you know, he comes up the garden path and he gives me this he gives me this lawsuit, and it was in the door of my studio. And I mean, I have often said that, you know, my stomach sort of dropped 10 meters through the floor. And I felt that, but I felt it for a few minutes, literally a few minutes. And then I said, okay. And then I basically said, okay, bring it on. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight this. I'm right. People, progressives, left-wing people who are seeing the corruption, people who are angry with the ANC for getting behind this corrupt character, an ANC that I still supported then. I'm going to fight them, and I'm going to think of ways, and I'm going to fight them through the cartoons, and I'm going to fight them in court if necessary. So I'd got that. The funny thing was, it was the same sheriff who came 2 years later. And by that stage, I mean, I was an old hand. I had, you know, this legal team, and
just leave it at the gate. I'll pick it up later.
No, well, I saw him. He came up, and I said, what is it? Is that that's suing me again? And he cracked up. The sheriff cracked up, and it was a really funny moment. I mean, he was trying, you know, just like one of those Monty Python characters who's going, you know, like, trying not to laugh when, you know, release Roderick, and it was, you know, he's in his uniform and he's trying to give me this lawsuit. So, you know, I've had that, but I don't want to make light of the death threats that I've received for other cartoons. I've had death threats. I have been beaten up in public.
Really?
Yeah.
Did a Muslim guy beat you up?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, I mean, you know, all of a sudden I was kind of, you know, everything turned. I got 6 death threats.
Oh, man.
Then during the World Cup, I was beaten up on the fan walk. I think that's a unique situation to happen in public.
Oh, wow.
And then there was an assassination plot on me later by the Tulsi twins. So, I've had that.
Who are the monsters now for Zapiro, or is there less material to work with in 2024?
Look, there are monsters. There are monsters. They're monsters. I mean, Zuma to me is still a monster, and he still affects our politics enormously. But there are monsters in many countries. I mean, Trump is a monster. Bolsonaro in Brazil and the effect that he still has. But in the DRC, you've got Syria, you've got Netanyahu, you have Putin. Yeah, there are monsters all over the world, and these are mostly reactionary, populist demagogues who've somehow managed to use social media and use the like difficult circumstances in the world to I mean they exert pressure, and they are monsters that they have to be exposed. Here we do have some monsters in some of the political parties, but whether or not they're monsters, not so much. I'm looking at the politics. I'm looking at the hypocrisy.
Jonathan Shapiro. Zapiro, sir, it's been a pleasure. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you.